What's good, everybody? It's your boy JB9 Deuce representing JB's Speak Easy, the black platform where black men speak freely. Once again, I am your host, JB9 Deuce. Welcome, everybody, to the show. It's a pleasure to be with you guys once again. Excuse me. I'm actually online on Saturday afternoon. Usually, I'm kind of busy on Saturdays, but I made time for y'all today. Thank you guys for your support because y'all made time for me. I made time for y'all. So thank you so much. Really quick, I would like to introduce the topic. Today's topic will be I kind of wrote it backwards between the description and under my name and the actual title in the show, which was segregation or integration, which was better for black people. I said segregation or integration, which one was better for black people? And bigger question I probably should put in the title was Martin or Malcolm Wright. Now, see, I'm about to play clips from both Martin and Malcolm, and off the top, I'm gonna tell you guys as soon as I'm done who I actually agree with more, and I believe his way worked more. And we need to actually have movements that had a similar philosophy. And the philosophy, he had a couple philosophies, and people misinterpret his last philosophy. But I would like to go over at least two to three of them. But I have time. We have an hour today. So okay. Also, I'm going to put the link in my on my Facebook page so that people can have the link to come on because they want. I actually do want black people's opinion on this. Let me see. Let me see. First, I sent you the link in case you want to come on in a minute. I'm gonna play a couple clips. Let me see. Real quick, guys. Basically, in my opinion, then we'll get into then I'm gonna get in Tupac. I'm gonna get into Dr. King's speech that I'm gonna play that he did for 11 months. It said before he died. But real fast, I'm trying to get everybody in here. Um, so basically, today's topic is segregation or integration. Which one was better for Black people? And I heard a lot of misconceptions, and I had a few opinions from people that actually lived through the time that would say that we actually have it pretty good as we have it today. So here we go, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and let Martin talk for a minute. So get a little how many seconds is it? 26-minute clip, but I'm not gonna play 26 minutes. I'm gonna go play a few minutes of the important parts I feel like emphasize my point that I'm gonna try to make in a few minutes. All right, thank you guys. Here we go, Dr. King. Oh, let me put it in president mode. Excuse me, guys. All right. All right, here we go. This is Dr. King talking to NBC. 11 months talking about the civil rights struggle before he died. I'm gonna get into this a little bit as soon as it's done. It's 26 minutes, but I'm not gonna go through all of it. Here we go. Thank you guys for sharing.
Swing, Civil Rights, King, Van Oker, roll 20, sound 36.
Dr. King, this church is as good a place as any to go back over your commitment to the civil rights movement. When you went out from here into university and then you went to Montgomery, Alabama and started the bus boycotts there, what was the philosophy of the civil rights movement as you saw it then, more than 10 years ago?
Well, I would say then the philosophy was that we must go all out to use legal and nonviolent methods to gain full citizenship rights for the Negro people of our country. Of course, that particular struggle and that philosophy centered on breaking down all of the barriers of legal segregation. So I would say that in that period, the basic thrust for the gaining of citizenship rights for Negroes was to end the humiliation surrounding the whole system of legal segregation.
Dr. King, was there something peculiar to the place where you started and the kind of people you attracted? I mean by that, there was a strong attachment on the part of your parishioners in Montgomery to the church. They were older people, weren't they?
Yes, I would say by and large, they were older people who participated in the boycott because they were the ones using the bus more than anybody else. And Montgomery was a community predominantly church-centered, so that it was very easy to get to the vast majority of Negroes because they were in some way connected with a church in the community.
Sir, in addition to your commitment to the idea of nonviolence, wasn't it also the only thing you could do, the white community having the monopoly on violence, that if you had tried violence, they would have met it with violence? It was the only device open to you, wasn't it?
Well, I'll put it another way, that morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. Now, there is no doubt about the fact that in our struggle in Montgomery and all over the United States for that matter, nonviolence is also practically sound. It would just be impractical for the Negro to turn to violence. He has neither the instruments nor the techniques of violence. We are about 10 or 11% of the total population of the nation, and I would say we're about 1/10 of the firepower. So it would just be totally impractical and unwise and unrealistic for the Negro to think of violence. Well, I saw this in the beginning in Montgomery, but this wasn't the basic reason that I.
All right, guys, I would like to actually comment on what Dr. King just got through saying right now, because I think it's very important because it goes to my next point. In this discussion, especially the one with my headline underneath my name, where it says, was Martin or Malcolm right? I actually like to comment on this because at the end of the day, what Martin said was 100% correct, and it has factual evidence to back up his claim. See, a lot of people in my generation love to say, oh, well, you know, we need to fight the white man. We need to get guns and just go out and start doing a bunch of killing. No, that sound makes us feel good. It may even massage our ego. But is it, like Dr. King said, is it practical? And I would say not by any means, because it was what he almost said 10 to 13% then. I think we're even smaller of a country. No, I think we're 13% now. So it's we've actually gotten smaller since Dr. King's death. And to think that, hold on just a second, guys. To think that, to believe that thinking that violence, going at the white man with violence, rather than strategically going about it, will be a very foolish move for us to make. For example, all black people like to talk about going to war with white folk. We're 13% of the country, not to mention that we're a smaller minority, even of other minorities. And to be honest with you, a lot of those other minorities don't like you like that either. So if it was going to be a war versus black people, we probably would lose just on the numbers alone. So we can have as much ego, as much pride, as much as you ain't gonna talk to me like that, all we want to, but we gotta do what? Go about this smart. And this is why I think the collision between Martin and Malcolm got into it, because they couldn't understand that black people, yes, we want to seem almighty, we want to go about it, we want to alpha our way into battle, but at the end of the day, part of being an alpha is using your mind just as much as using your physical force as a man. It's a balance between your mind and body. That's what a man's supposed to do. And that's what got black men through, just like a Dr. King back in the day. And there was also a misconception that Dr. King, around the time of his death, this is 11 months before his death, started changing his theory on how he wanted to go about civil rights. And he just explained it earlier. He still never gave up on the nonviolent approach, and it led into what I just said. Going after white people, with violence just because they use violence against you. It sounds like it makes sense, but you have to think from what he say, practical point of view. And though I respect Malcolm, he wasn't being practical, he was being emotional, because he felt like, oh, I'm just going to go in here, we're going to shoot these white people. No, you act like they going to let us shoot them. You know what I'm saying? We're outnumbered. We must be strategic. And black people love to talk about war and violence. Well, one thing you have to understand about war, especially all you niggas that been to jail, y'all understand the art of war by sign too. There's one of those things, I may be misquoting it. I mean, not misquoting it, but paraphrasing it. It says that basically the best wars, how it says, is the wars that were won. Man, how did it say that? It says the best war, or it says the war. The best wars won were the ones where you didn't have to fight or something like that. I'm sorry that I got that wrong, but it's basically saying that strategy, being strategic in how you approach situations is more important than actually just getting the fighting done. Sometimes it's not. As a matter of fact, it's not the fighting that wins wars. What wins wars is the strategy of how you fight. And so I believe the strategy and how Martin fought was more important than him trying to say, I'm going to go shoot a bunch of white people like how Malcolm was doing. It was impractical, which is why they disagreed on this issue. But I'm going to let Dr. King speak a little bit more longer. Here we go.
Turned to nonviolence and that I believed in it as a philosophy. I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
Is there something about nonviolence that made it, and I use that in the past tense, that made it more useful among Southern Negroes than the ghetto Negroes of the North?
I wouldn't say there's anything that makes it more useful to Southern Negroes. I think it is true that we've had more nonviolent movements in the South because the problem for many years was more crystallized and, in a sense, more visible in the South. We didn't have many civil rights activities on a massive scale in the North until 3 or 4 years ago. So I would say that we just haven't had a chance to experiment on a broad scale with nonviolence in the Northern ghetto. I have the feeling that nonviolence is as applicable and workable in the Northern ghetto as it is in the South. There's a larger job there. The frustrations at points are much deeper. The bitterness is deeper. And I think that's because in the South, we can see pockets of progress here and there. We've really made some strides that are very visible, and every Southern Negro knows that he can do things today that he couldn't do 4 or 5 years ago. Whereas in the North, the Negro sees only retrogress, and he doesn't find it as easy to get his vision centered on his target, the target of opposition, as he does in the South. Consequently, this is made for despair and at many points cynicism, a feeling that you can't win. And it simply means that we've got to develop in the North a massive job of organization and mobilizing forces and resources to deal with the problem in the urban ghettos of the North, just as we've done it in the South.
Well, in the South, particularly in Alabama, you had visible villains, Jim Clark, Bull Connor, cattle prods, police dogs. But in the North, you don't have those visible villains. Isn't it hard to get your people aroused and directed at something that isn't visible?
Well, that's exactly right. And this is what I was saying when I said it's harder to see a target. In the South, in the nonviolent movement, we were aided always, on the whole, by the brutality of our opponent. It isn't the same way in the North. The other thing is that you don't have legal segregation in the North as you do in.
Okay, guys, I'm going to let that pause for a second. But yeah, I'd like to get back to my original point. So today's show is about integration. Basically, in so many words, was it better for Black people being segregated or better being integrated by Black people, right? Here's my philosophy. I believe it was worse for us being segregated than us being integrated, because I think somewhere along the lines, what there was a misunderstanding in what we searched for or what we, you get what I'm saying? I will say this. I come from a family of people that are old school, like old school Southern brothers. Like my dad is from Mississippi, not just any part of Mississippi, from Columbia, the rural area where when blacks got hung, he remembers going to see, going to school and stuff and seeing bodies and stuff like that not being hung, but, seeing people gather around and seeing, people looking at the body that was just mutilated or dead. My uncle remembers the time when the whole Emmett Till thing happened. I have an older uncle who's in his 70s and 80s. He said he remembers the uncle, how it hit Mississippi when we finally seen. But see, it didn't hit Mississippi like they were shocked. They were more shocked at the fact that it made headlines because they've been with seeing dead bodies and stuff like that in Mississippi. They've been with saying, oh, they hung another nigga again. And it was scary for niggas then. And not scary for niggas mean, excuse me, for black people. I'm sorry. There's older black people watching. I'm sorry. I'm kind of trying to, talk to both generations at once, But black people were very scared. And this is what bothers me about black people in my age group, the millennials, the Generation X, the millennials, zillennials. We like to actually challenge what the elders went through by saying, oh, well, if I lived at that time, they wasn't going to talk to me like that. I was going to do whoop, 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 whoop. I'm like, and I always got to remind them that, listen, you don't think that they wanted to fight like that? It was a battle for survival, and you couldn't survive thinking that, well, they're just going to have to kill me. If every black man had that thought, we'd all be dead. If every black woman had that thought, we would all be dead. So one of us had to have sense. One of us had to think, wait a minute, we have to go about this strategically, which is why I agreed with Martin. But with all fairness, I know there's some Malcolm fans out there, I'm going to play clips of Malcolm as well. But I would like to talk to my generation to say, you heard what Dr. King just was saying about how dirty basically a lot of white folks was doing blacks. They were literally hanging us, redlining us so we couldn't buy houses, and taxing us on universities that we could not go to. Now, I was having to talk with my younger cousin who was trying to say we just wanted to be white people's friends and white ISIS code. It had nothing to do with that. Because at the end of the day, it was blacks in America that built this country. That White House that every white president sat down, including Obama's half-breed ass, that whole building was built by white folk. Most of these mansions, most of these families, or these Fortune 500 companies, the 7 families that run the world, the Rockefellers, all of those people, they all had slaves, and black people helped help build what they have today and what we have today in America. I'd be damned if I told that I won't be treated equally in something I helped build. That ain't right. That ain't right. But if anybody would like to come up, we're talking about civil rights today. Civil rights, guys, come on up. If you guys want to come up and have a chat, the link is in the description. Let me see. Go on Facebook. I like all black people to get in on this. In fact, I would like my Uncle Johnny Mack, since he has so much to say. Let me put him in there. Hold on just a second, guys. Hold on just a second. I'll play a little bit more of his video while I make a call. You guys go ahead just a second.
In the South. So it is much more difficult to get people to see exactly what you're doing, but it isn't an impossible job. It's a hard, it's a tedious job at times to get people to be aroused from their apathetic slumbers, but I still feel that Negroes in the North can be motivated just as they were motivated in the South. And I think as time goes on with the growing economic deprivation in the Negro community, it will even be easier because people will come to see that not only is something wrong in general, but something is wrong in particular in their own economic and housing situations.
Well, what is it? I mean, how do you find it? It's very subtle in the North, is it not?
It's subtle, but it's becoming much more visible. Anybody can see that the schools are more segregated in the North today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court rendered its decision declaring segregation unconstitutional. Anybody can look around the ghetto and see that ghetto schools are predominantly segregated and devoid of quality. Anyone who moves through a major ghetto of our country will see the housing conditions. People don't have to be reminded that they are forced to live in slums in many instances, and they're often rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. And it isn't too hard to see the exploitation that the Negro confronts in the ghetto, where he is forced to pay more for less and constantly trying to make ends meet, but because of either no job as a result of unemployment or a job that is so economically unprofitable that the person can't make ends meet. And I think they see all of these things, and more they are coming to see them, because before the people of the North were looking to the South, and they supported the struggles of the South. Now they're coming to see that their problems are very real, and they've got organized to grapple with them.
Was there something hypocritical about the fact that the South existed and the North could point the finger? And then when the Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s, you couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 of the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? That people knew that Negroes were being denied what was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this to me is the so-called white backlash. It's merely a new name for an old phenomenon. I see the white backlash as a continuation of the same ambivalence and vacillation of white America on the whole question of racial justice that has existed since the founding of our nation. I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we are getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people devoid or thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that
Okay, guys, I'm sorry I let that run for a while, but I kind of want you to hear Dr. King's thoughts on that. Where it talked about how segregation affected the school system. Now, I know one thing that some of my older family members and some people that lived back through the 60s and 70s could verify. Sorry, I tried to run back and forth to try to do something, but or something that it verified was When it comes to the system of school systems, especially with academia, let's just say in higher education, people say that segregation, like I hear a lot of people say, segregation was the worst thing. We should have stuck to ourselves. But I said, sticking to ourselves in the country that we built seems asinine in the fact that we built this country and we was forbidden to some of the fruits of this actual system in which we helped to create. For example, when it came to academia, did you guys know that colleges that you guys go to now, they say black women are the most educated or black men are in college? Did you know that you couldn't go to certain universities at a certain time, especially with the idea of integration, segregation? Because did you know that our grandparents have to pay taxes on colleges you could not even go to? You know what I'm saying? The college you go to now, imagine being said, you can't go here, but you still have to pay taxes here. Or redlining. You want to get credit, get housing, you couldn't get housing. That's why they had to pass the Fair Housing Act. Because whites were trying to keep blacks from being able to move into certain neighborhoods. And now they're starting to implement this gentrification that move blacks up out of the community. It's actually just a new era version. And I repeat, a new era version of what they were doing back then. So when you look at the question, segregation or integration, which one was best for black people? I, in my personal opinion, would say integration was better. Because like I said, we built this country, and to be told we can't enjoy none of the proceeds of it, and to be mistreated, killed, and murdered, even in the military. Did you know that there was men that went to fight in World War II, Vietnam, I believe in the war before that, even World War I? Do you understand those soldiers came back and were murdered in their uniforms? That's to show you that it doesn't matter if you're a black person that fought for this country, you could be still executed. That's wrong. I'm saying that's wrong. And if anybody has any difference of opinion, please ask me why. Now, I'm gonna play a clip from from Malcolm X, because I know everybody loves him a little bit more than Dr. King, especially in my generation. They like to act as if he was just the 100% correct in what he was saying. So let's just hear some of the things he would say. Let's hear Malcolm X's interview when we play a couple clips. Here we go. Malcolm X at Berkeley. Here we go.
Today, in our discussion of minority groups, we have with us two guests. One is Minister Malcolm X. Shabazz, one of the top leaders of the Nation of Islam, or the so-called Black Muslims. And we also have Mr. Herman Blake, one of the teaching assistants in the course. We will discuss today some of the goals and some of the strategies of the Nation of Islam. And I wonder if Mr. Blake might start it off by asking Mr. Shabazz a question.
Minister Malcolm, the thing that I thought might be good for starting it off is to talk about one of the most pervasive beliefs in the general society about the Nation of Islam, and that is that it is an organization dedicated to the use of violent means to attain its goals. The question I have is, how true is this, and why do you think it persists in society?
Well, the Muslims who have accepted the religion of Islam and follow the religious guidance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have never bombed any churches, have never murdered any little girls, as was done in Birmingham, have never lynched anybody, have never at any time been guilty of initiating any aggressive acts of violence during the entire 33 years or more that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching us. The charge of violence against us actually stems from the guilt complex that exists in the conscious and subconscious minds of most white people in this country. They know that they've been violent in their brutality against Negroes, and they feel that someday the Negro is going to wake up and try and do unto them as they have do unto the whites as the whites have done unto us.
Okay, pause. Let's stop right there with what Malcolm said. Everything he said up until now, and the other brother, I forget his name, said was very true. Up until how is Muslims more violent than some of the violence that whites inflicted upon us. Here's the issue, especially what I have with Malcolm just saying, that the greatest fear white America is going to have is us to turn on them and use violence against them as they've used upon us. The reason why I would disagree with him there and agree with Martin is because they have the numbers. They don't care if you rebel. That would just give them even more just cause to wipe us out, which it is. It's one thing to have violence inflicted upon you, then it's a whole nother thing to have something called what? An annihilation of your race, aka extinction. Because we're 13% of the country, and it's basically another 87% of everything else, including the majority white, especially at this time, without the whole adding on of immigrants that also may not favor blacks like that. Disrespect to any other races, but I'm saying that at this time, blacks were hated around the world. Remember, we were enslaved around the world, but we were also hated around the world and wanted to be kept, and people wanted to keep us oppressed around the world. So would it be fair to say that Malcolm was a little bit, this goes back to what Malcolm Martin said about being impractical. And it's impractical to say that they would fear us rising up violently. It's one thing to get things done. They may fear us getting the laws changed, because it's what I always tell black people. You can't fight white people, racist rights, like how we fight each other. See, with black people, we're more like pit bull dogs against each other. You bark at me, I'm going to bark at you. Well, that's not how you fight white people, because white people say that, if you bark at me, I'll just have you put in jail. You inflict violence upon me, yeah, I'll take a couple marks and bruises, but I can have you put in jail for assault. You get what I'm saying? So not only do they have the judicial system, but then they can implement the other thing, which is violence, which is, guess what? Y'all go too hard, we're just going to go twice as harder. We got here's the thing what niggas don't understand, brothers don't understand. We got the numbers to do this to you. As long as you have the numbers, excuse me. It's a little parched there. But no, see, as long as they have the numbers, they are actually in a bigger advantage to get rid of us than to actually have a fair fight. It's one thing if we was 50-50, and then we'll see how the shit blows. But how this stuff goes. But it wasn't like that. But I don't want to interrupt Malcolm for too long and talk too much.
We aren't a violent group. We are taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to obey the law, to respect everyone who respects us. We're taught to display courtesy, to be polite. But we're also taught that at any time, anyone in any way inflicts or seeks to inflict violence upon us, we are within our religious rights to retaliate in self-defense to the maximum degree of our ability. We never initiate any violence upon anyone, but if anyone attacks us, we reserve the right to defend ourselves. So to accuse us of being violent is like accusing a man who is being lynched, who is being hung on a tree, simply because he struggles vigorously against his lyncher. The victim is accused of violence, but the lyncher is never accused of violence. And I only point this out because the various racist groups that are set up in this country by whites and who have actually practiced violence against blacks for 400 years are never associated or identified or made synonymous with the term violence. But whites speak of Muslims almost synonymously with violence. Whenever Muslims are mentioned by them, violence is brought up, but it's not connected with any other group. This is a sort of a propaganda tactic, or what I would call psychological warfare, to in some way make the image of the
Okay, amen. I have to give an amen to Malcolm X on this one, because I do believe there's a lot of psychological warfare that whites do impose upon blacks to try to keep us down. There's no question there in my mind. The only question I have now is, when black people now we're aware of what they tried to do, just like they were aware back in the day, how are we going to become aware of the next course of action we should take that should go against exactly what he's preaching? Excuse me, not what he's preaching, but what the white people are trying to do, by using this not reverse psychology, but the psychology of, you guys are being violent towards us. The mechanism is violent, but you guys are just hanging like 30 dudes just a few days ago. You know what I'm saying? You just hung people those black that fall in the military a few days ago. How is this possible? How is this possible that I could be more violent than you when your whole thing is obliterating people that look what? Dark skinned like me. This is why when I talk to people my age group, when they talk about racism in today's day, I said, is it real racism or a disagreement based off classism? Because at the end of the day, racism at their time actually ended up on black people dying. A debate to get you dead. Like if Malcolm and them didn't unite as a nation like this, they would have died. You feel me? Having this kind of outlook on white people back then. That's why I tell people my age group, they think it's so easy to say, well, if I lived back then, I would have did such and such. I said, that's easier said than done when you didn't go through what they went through, especially being a number so small. And that's why I think Malcolm kind of forgot, but I do agree with him on the psychological warfare that whites used upon blacks. But here we go. I do agree.
The Muslims in this country be a violent image rather than a religious image.
I'd like to ask a question in that regard. What's interesting is that members of the Nation of Islam have not used violence even when black Americans were attacked. How do you account for this? Does this in any way contradict some of the basic premises of your movement?
I don't know how you mean.
Well, you maintain, for example, that you will not or that you should not use violence unless you are attacked by the white man. And I think we can note in the last several years, certainly, dozens and dozens and dozens of instances in which Negroes have been attacked, killed in some instances.
You mean in these demonstrations?
These demonstrations and the bombings, for example, recently in Birmingham, where they killed 4 little Negro girls. And what interests me is the fact is that the Nation of Islam has not done anything to retaliate.
I think you should be happy.
But the important thing is, does your lack of action contradict any of your basic principles?
I'll explain it. You should be happy that Muslims who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, number one, don't believe in any form of integration, and who believe that every mention of the word integration by whites, whether it be from the mouth of Kennedy on down to the mouth of the lowest, raggediest white liberal in the street who is beatnik-like involving himself in these integration efforts, if we believed in it, we would integrate and we would fight anybody who got in our way or made any effort whatsoever to stop us from integrating. If we really believe that the law of the land, the Supreme Court, and
let's pause right there. Now, this is where me and Malcolm kind of disagree, because like I said, I already chose sides on what side I'm on in this issue. I'm more with Martin's side because I saw how effective it was with going with his method, regardless of the whole ego. It seems like there's a thing with the Nation of Islam with this ego thing, where it's like, well, I don't want to integrate with whites because, you know, for such and such, and we're going to get back to this clip. But I would like to say this. This goes back to my original point. If black people contributed to the building and the funding and the construction of this country, why in the world will we ever feel like it's wrong for us to want to integrate? Because again, integrate and assimilate, there are two things that are synonymous with each other. But at the end of the day, integration is getting what's owed to you. Like I'm gonna play that Martin Luther King clip again, where he says, "I'm coming to get my check." You see what I'm saying? Because they owe us a check. That's the whole idea of reparation. But they owe us way more than reparations. Because listen, I want people to understand. People in my age group. Did you not know that, especially if you're in college now, did you know that you could not go to college at certain universities, but your grandparents have to pay taxes on them? What sense does that make? Or the fact that if you was in the military and you fought for this country, did you know you could be murdered in your uniform the day you got off the plane back in America? You could have been murdered and hung from the same tree in a country that you fought for. But you don't want integration because you want to have this black pride, black power. Let me explain something to you. My father is from Columbia, Mississippi. He lived through this idea of what blacks like to talk about, especially my age group. What kind of gets me with them is my dad told me, like, look, black people like to say, oh, integration was bad because we had our own business when we were segregated. It was better when we were segregated. I said we were worse off when we were segregated because, yeah, those black people had their own black businesses. What my father told me, now he lived through this. My dad was born in 1954, which means he grew up in the 60s. It was his teenage years and his adult years in the 70s. He said, yeah, blacks had their own businesses, but you have to understand the quality of the business. Because anybody can start a business. You get a LLC, it even goes back then. It's harder then to get it than it is now. But you can get a business. Anybody can start a business. But black businesses weren't as effective or weren't as, I would say, resourceful as the stores where which whites were shopping. For example, if we have Walmart and then we had the black version of Walmart, whatever that was at their time. I don't know all the name of the story, but based off what my father told me, the black Walmart, let's just use an example of some of their resources. Milk. Usually when you buy milk from Walmart or Kmart, Target, whatever you get it from, right? The local store, it usually has 2 weeks till it expires. 2 weeks. But in the black store, if you shop there, you had to, yes, you would spend probably a little, you probably would spend equal to, maybe a little less, but you only have 3 days to use that milk. What's 3 days compared to 14 days? It's 11 days. You have 11 days less time to drink that milk or use for cereal, whatever, making eggs, whatever, than it was if you went to the white Walmart. But see, the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't have been no white Walmart. This should be America, in which, like I just said, we had military shows. My uncle fought in Vietnam. My grandfather fought in World War II. I'll be damned if I can't be able to shop at the same store. The same store built on American soil in which we just fought for. So you've got to be out your mind to think that I could contribute to something and then not get the benefits of it. That's insane within itself. But I'm gonna let Malcolm get back to what he's saying. Then I'm gonna flip back to the Martin clip. But I just like to say that, especially to my generation, I see somebody's watching. How you doing? Welcome to JB Speakeasy. If you disagree with what I'm saying, I'll put a link in the Facebook comment section. If you'd like to come up, whoever this is watching, I would love to speak with you. There is a link there. And I would like you to come up, because if you're a black person, this affects us, including the person that's watching. Or if you're a white person watching and saying, well, I had one of those good, white grandparents that tried to help blacks. Well, then you should be on my side going against what Malcolm is saying, because Malcolm is saying these dirty white liberals, and I don't agree with that. There were Jews that tried to help blacks just as much as there was other whites that felt like this is wrong. See, me, I'm on the side of right and wrong. And if we could come to the consensus of what's right and what's wrong, we come to what's consensus of what's right and what's wrong, then I think that's be the beginning part of us actually being able to have a more unified society. But let's Malcolm go back to what he was saying. Thank you for watching. Whoever's watching, please bear with me. I'm playing clips, so maybe you can hear, so you can get a kind of a background of what we're speaking on today. Here's Malcolm. Let's go.
And other so-called judicial bodies were for real when they talked about integration, we would integrate. And knowing that the law was on our side, and any effort we made to demonstrate toward integration, why, we would know the law should be on our side, if it's the law of the land. If it is the law of the land, then the demonstrators are within the law, and the discriminators are against the law. But to show you the hypocrisy of the law, when Negroes demonstrate for integration, instead of arresting the discriminators, the law arrests the demonstrators. So this is a foolish move on the part of Negroes. And when you foolishly get yourself involved with an enemy, then whatever comes upon you, that's your business. As Muslims, we believe that.
Okay, let's start right there. Let's go with what Malcolm's logic is right there. You want to bring up hypocrisy. Well, I got one hypocrisy in what he just said. He said the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, this is his words, and Muslims are taught to follow the law and not go against the law. Yet you just said it was foolish for people, because what you're going to go on to see is that he's going to take shots at Dr. King. If you're a Negro trying to go according to the system, then you're wrong for that too. But you just said that Elijah Muhammad ushered, or actually tried to push for blacks to actually follow the law. But now you're saying it's foolish. So are you, as the Nation of Islam, foolish for doing so? And there was one other point I was going to get to that he said, but I'm going to go ahead and go back to what he was saying to give him a chance to speak.
Separation is the best way and the only sensible way, not integration. And but on the other hand, when we see our people being brutalized by white bigots, white racists, we think that they are foolish to allow themselves to be beaten and brutalized and do nothing whatsoever to protect themselves. They are foolish. They should have the right to defend themselves against any attack made against them by anyone. If a dog is biting a black man, the black man should kill the dog. Whether the dog is a police dog, a hound dog, or any kind of dog. If a dog is sick on a black man, when that black man is doing nothing but trying to take advantage of what the government says is supposed to be his, then that black man should kill that dog, or any two-legged dog who sicks the dog on it.
Should other black men help that particular person who was attacked?
I think you'll find, sir, that there will come a time when black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves. Then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together. And this type of thinking also will bring an end to the brutality inflicted upon black people by white people. And it is the only thing that will bring an end to it. No federal court, state court, or city court will bring an end to it. It's something that the black man has to bring an end to himself.
Minister Malcolm, let me, on the basis of your two remarks, ask a double-pronged question. One, is it then your assertion that the laws with respect to how Negroes are supposed to have equal opportunity and equal rights in this country are not meaningful or believed by whites? And secondly, what is your opinion and attitude toward the civil rights movement in general, and particularly the Reverend Martin Luther King and his philosophy of nonviolent direct action?
If the white people really passed meaningful laws, it would not be necessary to pass any more laws. There are already enough laws on the law books to protect an American citizen. You only need additional laws when you're dealing with someone who's not regarded as an American citizen. But whites are so hypocritical. They don't want to admit that this black man is not a citizen. So they classify him as a second-class citizen to get around making him a real citizen. If he was a real citizen, you'd need no more laws. You'd need no civil rights legislation. Civil rights, when you have civil rights, you have citizenship. It's automatic. White people don't need laws to protect their citizenship because they're citizens. But they don't want to tell us we're not citizens. And at the same time, they don't want to pass laws that are meaningful enough to protect us as if we were citizens. And the Supreme Court desegregation decision is the best example I know. That's a law from the Supreme Court. 10 years have gone by. No desegregated schools. It hasn't been implemented beyond, I think, 9% in 10 years. So this just shows you the hypocrisy of the American white man. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. And for this reason, we who are Muslims, that is, who believe in the religion of Islam, who believe in God, we don't believe that black people will ever get any problem with laws being passed or new persons being put in office, white liberals being put in office. There is nothing that the white man will ever do to bring about true, sincere citizenship or civil rights recognition for black people in this country. Nothing will they ever do. They will always talk it, but they won't practice it. And with the Supreme Court, if the NAACP can tell me that they want a desegregation decision for me 10 years ago, but yet the schools haven't been desegregated, as I say, this is a victory with no victory. It's a victory that.
Now let's concentrate on what Malcolm just said right there, especially when he attacked the NAACP. Shout out to Megan Evers and all the original stars of that. But my family's part of the NAACP. We have, NAACP has came to my aid when I went through a few things that I went through in my life where I needed the gathering of the community, and they were there for a brother. You know what I'm saying? But let's concentrate on what he said. He said it's the appearance of segregation or integration, but no appearance of actual getting the integration or the civil rights. Well, us today as blacks, we're actually living in the thing that Dr. King fought for, which actually disproves him. Because right now, black students are actually allowed to go to college. Like I keep using an example. I thought it was the most screwed up part about segregation was that blacks had to pay taxes on colleges they could not attend. But now we can attend them, and not only attend them, but be valedictorian if we wanted to. Now, this is in the 60s. I forget what year it was. I think in the beginning of the clip it shows it. But it shows us that we have come a long way. Now, are things perfect? Of course not. Nothing's perfect. And if he was expecting, or the Muslims expected for things to be perfect, then they were crazy to believe that in the first place. Because at the end of the day, we know we're dealing with whites. I'm not saying all white people are good, just like I'm not saying all white people are bad. But to try to say it was better for us being segregated, currently as he was speaking, y'all were segregated and getting tortured. See, the thing is to, even if you were a second-class citizen, the fact that we are actually a first-class citizen now, even though we have things, some disparities and stuff like that that go on, we must understand things are a lot better for us as blacks now than it was then. And one of the worst parts that we missed out of all of this was that Malcolm X, excuse me, he's taking these little slight shots at Dr. King, because that's what he really is, the Dr. King and the NWC. He's taking slight shots because remember, Muslims thought, let's just go fight these white people. Let's just fight these white people. We are 13%, Malcolm. Even to this day, we're the smallest percentage of American society, but somehow you think it makes us feel or would have been better for us to argue, fuss, and fight from a point of view of we're going to beat y'all by any means necessary. I agree, but it's us as intelligent blacks, as you said out of your mouth, to decide what the means are necessary. That is us as, I'll say it again, us as intelligent blacks, it's up to us to decide who and what means are necessary. And just saying I'm gonna grab a bunch of guns and kill a bunch of white folks won't get us anywhere. But go ahead, Dr. Malcolm X. I'm gonna get back to Dr. King.
That you can talk about, but it's a victory you can't show me. So if you represent the NAACP and you are telling me about this great victory you won for me, when I look at you, I have to conclude that either you have been duped yourself or else you are trying to dupe me. And in most instances where the civil rights struggle is involved, there is no civil rights leader can point to me one concrete gain, practical gain that black people have made in the civil rights field in this country, not only during the past 10 years, but during the past 100 years.
Now, the other part was with respect to Mr. King and the nonviolent direct action.
Well, I will let Jimmy Baldwin and John Killens and Lou Lomax, the writers, answer that. Speaking right after this church was bombed in Birmingham, Christian church was bombed in Birmingham by Christians too, mind you. And these 4 little girls were murdered. John Killens and James Baldwin and Lomax and the Negro writers and actors had a meeting at the town hall in New York. And Killen pointed out concerning these murders of these little girls, said the killings had raised doubts about the intelligence of the nonviolence in the civil rights struggle. He went on to declare that he could no longer be asked to love those who persecuted and killed Negroes. He also, and the writer, Mr. Handler, who's describing this, said that Killens, it was not clear concerning Killens' remarks to his audience that he was breaking with it was clear rather to his audience that he was breaking with the doctrine of the Reverend Martin Luther King's philosophy that as Christians, Negroes should love their fellow man in a truly religious sense. Now, James Baldwin, speaking on that same platform, said, and I was present during this entire affair, asserted that the American people shared a collective guilt for the persecution of Negroes, much as Germans did because of their silence during the Nazi persecution. He denounced President Kennedy for what he termed Kennedy's lack of passion in the civil rights struggle. Mr. Baldwin said that there could no longer be a Republican Party for the Negro people as long as it listed a Barry Goldwater, nor a Democratic Party for the Negro people with a Senator Eastland on its roster. He asserted that the federal government acted swiftly and energetically, that unless the federal government acted swiftly and energetically, future slaughter would make Birmingham look like a dress rehearsal. And now, what do I think about King's attitude? King's right-hand man, Wyatt Walker, at King's convention, according to the New York Times on September the 26th, said, quote, we have been duped, meaning these persons involved in the civil rights struggle, of which King is the symbolic leader. His right-hand man says, and I quote, we have been duped or have duped ourselves into believing that the chains have been broken, when in truth.
Okay, let's take a look at what he just said. that King's right-hand man, I forget what he said his name was, said that we have been duped. Now, in any movement, I always say in any group where there's trying to make change, there's always going to be people who lose faith in the moniker or the idea of what we're trying to get across to the world. Any kind of movement. Let's take Christianity, since they want to bring that up. Basically, whoever that was, he was like the Judas was to Jesus. Yeah, I was with you, and then now I turn on you because things don't go the way I believe they should. And in any movement, you can never have a movement where people start turning on you inside the movement. You feel what I'm saying? Jesus was the only one that was successful in doing so because his ministry was powerful. As we see, Dr. King's ministry was powerful because we got a lot of places because of Dr. King's philosophy that Malcolm is trying to clown right now, because that's pretty much what he's trying to do. We got further with his philosophy than with Malcolm's philosophy. So just because somebody within Martin's camp had a disagreement does not mean that was we weren't duped. Again, there are white people that were against black people no matter what we stood for, but that don't mean what we stood for was wrong. This is what I always believe. Anytime you speak, I want y'all to write this down as black people. As black people, write this down. Anytime you speak truth, you will be faced with opposition, but even more sometimes from your own side, because it's like there was a Judas was to Jesus. There's always one there that's going to do what? Turn on you. But let's see what Malcolm has to say while I answer this call. Let's go.
Truth, we have only been chained more securely. Half freedom has in many instances been worse than no freedom at all. Why? Don't ask me what I think about their struggle. I can tell you what they think about their struggle. And they are pointing out that it is.
But Malcolm, that's only one person out of the group. And even if there's one or two or three out of a whole movement, why are you only quoting what some of the people that went against it that happen to agree with your narrative that we've been duped? Because at the end of the day, Malcolm and Martin didn't get to see what we have today. Today is not perfect. There is racism today, but it's nowhere near. If Malcolm and Martin were still alive, they'll tell you it's nowhere what we go through near what they went through there. So we can't, your method and the Muslims' method did not work. As a matter of fact, well, before I get to that, I'm going to let him finish. It's only right. Let me let him finish.
That it is.
Let me let him finish. But I really have an issue with that, what he just said. But I personally have a few issues with what Malcolm says on some certain stuff. But as you see, I'm gonna interject as necessary. Here we go. Because what I believe, I don't like to say I feel, on this channel we speak on facts and what we know. I believe that what Malcolm is saying, he's not thinking about certain things in perspective, because the male ego, or the ego as blacks that we have, kind of not, I'm not gonna say we don't have the right to have, but one right where we're not in position to have this ego of, I don't need to. No, you need to understand how to move in the system, and Martin did, and I'm gonna explain Martin's greatest plan. That show where because some people said that Martin turned on his plan because of what Malcolm was doing and doing what Malcolm was doing. That's actually a lie. And I'm going to show you why. And I'm going to explain to you something that most black people, especially of my generation, do not understand. My generation needs to listen. Let's do it. My generation needs to listen. Let's do it. Excuse me, guys. I'm trying to do this right now.
Is becoming more difficult every day for the civil rights leaders to keep the masses of black people nonviolent and long-suffering and patient, and keep them from becoming disenchanted. I hope that answers your question.
Well, now there's a new party which has started on the East Coast called the Freedom Now Party, an all-black organization. Would you comment upon this, and also upon the possibility that the Nation of Islam might begin to turn some of its attention to the political arena, in view of the fact that it is in the political arena that Negroes have not been able to in any way get justice, as has been pointed out in your previous statement?
I'm not familiar with the Freedom Now party. I'm not too familiar with politics, period. Only that in the sense that white politicians have usually been very hypocritical where the so-called Negroes are concerned. So I'm a bit disenchanted with politicians and politics. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a religious man, and his teaching is religious, and his solutions are religious. The Freedom Now party, from what I understand, is headed by a man named, a lawyer named Conrad Lynn. I know him, he probably means well. Before passing an opinion on what it is he's trying to do, I would like to analyze it and see who's subsidizing him, see who his friends are, especially who his white friends are. And after a careful analysis, if I could conclude that there was no white support, I would be inclined to have confidence in it. But if I saw him leaning too heavily upon his white liberal friends for support, then I'd be suspicious of that too. The Muslims, in my opinion, represent an all-black party. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad pointed out at before 10,000 in Philadelphia on September the 29th at a rally that we were having, that in 1964, the black people should band together and do something about electing, selecting and electing representatives, black representatives, politically, who have the rights and the best interests of the black people at heart. And that we should also unite together and sweep out of office all of the black political puppets who are used by the white power structure to continue white supremacy in our communities.
In that regard, would you include Congressman Dawson, for example, from Chicago, and some of the people who represent him on the Chicago City Council?
In what regard?
In the area of acting as a puppet.
I don't know what Mr. Muhammad's opinion is of Congressman Dawson. They both live right there in the city of Chicago together. I don't know what his opinion is of Congressman Dawson. I'm suspicious of any Negro, be he politician, be he clergyman, or civic leader who is constantly patted on the back by whites. I have a tendency to lead toward the Negro politician who is constantly condemned by the white power structure. This is my thought pattern. I'm giving you an insight of it.
You, though, mentioned Mr. Lynn and saying you'd like to know who his white friends are. Now, I'm wondering if you didn't make a contradictory statement in Muslim terms by using white and friend in the same phrase. That is
I
to
use
say,
friend in quotes.
I see. In other words, if a black man cannot have a white man as a friend.
He may have a white man who's friendly, but being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the.
Okay, let's actually look at what Malcolm actually said right there, because I actually do agree. And with Black Lives Matter, I actually said that. When it comes to what Malcolm said, is we have to be iffy of the white liberal who controls usually most of the country and how they pretend to be the friend of blacks. I believe that. I believe that right down to even Black Lives Matter. He's absolutely 100% correct. Like I said, though I side with Martin, I still can agree. This is how you come to consensus as a people, is if we can find where we agree to disagree, or disagree or agree, whatever. Consensus, meaning an agreement of both halves we could both meet in the middle on. And I think we can both meet in the middle on the idea that white liberals actually do not have the black versus have the black person's best interest at heart, but for their own interest, using the black people, or not even caring about black people in the general sense, like how we got this new woke stuff. Now I know I'm online, so I can't go after certain parties, certain groups. But I don't even like how they infiltrated the Black Lives Matter movement, because like we don't need y'all to help us get a movement passed, especially we're talking about police brutality. So I agree with what Malcolm said about us, the white liberals act like they're actual friends of blacks, but they're really not. I actually agree with him on that. But I will say this though. If we were to ever, I'm just saying hypothetically, if we were to ever say there was a time where white liberals actually did have black people's best interest at heart, it would have been more closer to what we had then, where the time he's speaking, than now. So if they weren't trustworthy then, we shouldn't trustworthy now. But for some reason now we trust them a lot more than we trusted them then. But go ahead, let Malcolm talk. But I do agree with him. White liberals do not have blacks at best interest at heart. Then I'm gonna flip back to Martin Luther King. Then I'm gonna make an ending closing statement, and then go about our day. If anybody's trying to come on, I see a lot of people was riding with me on this one, but I would like for people to give their opinion. And I appreciate on the playback you guys actually, give your opinion. But here we go. I'm gonna play back to Martin. Excuse me, Malcolm. Sorry, guys. Malcolm, guys. I know people want to be particular. Malcolm, I'm sorry.
The white conservative, in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
I would agree that no doubt there have been a large number of whites who have posed as liberals and as friends of the Negro, and who have time and again betrayed the Negro. On the other hand, I think one could point to a large number of whites who have struggled for civil rights, for equality, and have got little or nothing out of it, other than quite a few bruises.
Give me an example.
Well, the large number of white students who have gone into the South, for example, working for SNCC and other organizations.
Not working for SNCC or other organizations, but working for the white political machines who benefit by the voting efforts of Negroes.
Okay, I'll be more specific. I would cite Herbert Hill, for example, as a kind of person who has championed Negro job rights, for example, in New York City and elsewhere. He has fought the political machine.
First time I met Herbert Hill personally was when they were picketing to stop the working on the Harlem Hospital in Harlem. Negroes for 10 years had to fight the city to get an annex built on the Harlem Hospital. Because in Harlem, we need a hospital more so than anything else. Our people are sick. Plus, we do a lot of cutting and shooting of each other, though we profess to be nonviolent. And Herbert Hill brought his forces out and stopped the working on that site. This is the first time I ever saw him. Then when work was brought to a halt on a hospital in Harlem, the same Negroes tried to stop the work at the Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, which is predominantly white. They were out there for 3 months during the summer, couldn't stop anything. And I never saw Herbert Hill out there one time. Now, whenever it takes a stoppage of something that's going to affect the white man, you find the white liberal absent. But when it involves something that primarily will affect the best interests of black people and black people only, then that white liberal.
I agree with that.
Herbert Hill is the labor secretary for the NAACP.
I agree with that. I agree with what he said right there.
He was interested in black people.
I do agree with that. I do agree that with black people, with black movements, that white people, that white liberals, when things start affecting white people as a whole, not just what displeases them on a universal concept of what makes uncomfortable both blacks and liberal whites, because what blacks have to understand is not all white people are trustworthy, and not all white people are grimy either. There's also the section, because what black people have to understand is white people play a game called classism, and if you don't understand the difference, you're going to take it as racism. I think Malcolm was flirting with that line a little bit, but I will say this though, he's right on the aspect of when things affect white people. See, they don't mind. See, white liberals don't, and this is why I agree with Malcolm. White liberals don't have a problem agreeing with blacks on issues that affect their part of the class system. But when it starts talking about affecting both classes, both the upper class and the lower class of whites, that is both the upper class and lower class of whites, white people will code up. That's 100% true. Like I said, I'm on one side, But on this one, Malcolm, amen. You're 100%. And I know you're not a Christian, but amen. That's what I believe in my God sense because I stand on what's right. That's me personally. I stand on what's right and where the facts bear it out. So there we go. I agree with you, Malcolm. Go ahead.
Prepare a black man with the type of knowledge and understanding of the labor troubles involving black people that would enable a black man to sit in the same position as Secretary of Labor or Labor Secretary in the NAACP. I'm suspicious of whites who join Negroes and always have to be in the lead, who always have to be the head, who always have to be at the top in Negro organizations. Those whites who really have the interest of blacks at heart, let them give some advice to some Negroes and stand on the sideline. But don't join the organization and then get at the head of it and pose as a friend of Negroes.
Well,
Hey, Malcolm, I may disagree with you on a lot, but I agree with you on that. Every word you spoke, I don't have to repeat it. That's absolutely good, respectable. I don't like how when there's liberal whites who say they're on the side of black people, join black organizations and try to be the head of it. That's exactly what happened with Black Lives Matter. That's exactly what happened with Black Lives Matter. We had all these damn white liberals trying to say, "Oh, we for Black Lives Matter," but at the end of the daggone day, they put themselves at the head of the movement, which is why, no disrespect to this community, but you guys are a big part of this. Is right when we did Black Lives Matter. And the first part of and you know, everybody read the mission statement. The first mission statement said, we are about black trans, black gays, single motherhood, all this other stuff that had nothing to do with police brutality. But those white liberals had got a part of it and actually pushed their actual agenda on blacks. And this is where I do agree with Malcolm on this. As black people, we got to stop letting them do that. I repeat, we got to stop letting them do that, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to help with something, anybody you assist, you don't try to put yourself the head up. You just find where you can be an assistance towards. And see, they weren't trying to be an assistant that took over and have black people who did not read, like I read the mission statement that said that. And remember, this is the first mission statement, not the second one. That's how sneaky white people are. They gave two mission statements to where if Negroes was ignorant, they would have went for the second one without reading the first one. That happened with Black Lives Matter with Eric Gardner. But I agree with Malcolm on that one. Shout out to Malcolm on this one. I usually disagree with Malcolm, but this time I agree with Malcolm on this one. Go ahead, Malcolm. I agree.
I would defend his sincerity and his commitment.
As people devoid or thinking they're
Okay, guys, right now I'm about to get back into Martin. Now I gotta hear what Martin has to say, because I did enough of Malcolm. In fact, more Malcolm than Martin, and Martin's my dude. But that's why I gave Malcolm more of a chance, because anytime you're having a debate, you want your person, remember this, you want the person you disagree with to be able to have a point of view too. So I took a little extra time to let Malcolm say what he was trying to say. But now I'm gonna get back to my homeboy, not my homeboy like I know him, but the leader of what I believe is the ideology in which I follow today, Dr. King, and he follows my ideology of Christianity. But more importantly, because you know, Malcolm tried to attack Martin over this idea of, you know, you got to do what the white man does to you. You can't be peaceful with the white man. But understand this, I believe in the Bible. What the Bible says, and I believe in it, and God forgive me for not mentioning this first. Excuse me, I forget where it's found out in the Bible, but I know it's in the New Testament. If you guys want to find this, I got to ask the Lord for forgiveness, not for remembering exactly where to find this, but I do know how to. If you know how to use Google, you can find this. There's something called openbible.com. That is openbible.com. Capital OPENBIBLE.com says, type in the idea of fight evil with evil. And what the scripture says with fighting evil with evil, the Bible says, do not fight evil with evil, but overcome evil with good. And the only way you can do evil with good is by doing opposite of what evil is. And what black people don't understand is we're so used to violence and emotions that we say, oh hell no, I ain't gonna do that. I'm a fight, they hit me, I'm gonna hit them back. But what did Jesus say? He said, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for those that despitefully use you. Now, a lot of people say, Josh, that's crazy, this. But the Bible also says, those that aren't of the Spirit of God do not understand the things of the Spirit of God, for it's folly to them. So it's folly what Malcolm saw in Martin. It's folly for me to tell you to pray for your enemies. It's folly for me to tell you that you need to pray for those that despitefully use you. It seems like folly to them. But we saw out of both Martin and Malcolm's ways which one was more effective. Which one was more effective? Malcolm ended up, and there is the thing, I didn't get to finish on Malcolm, but Malcolm ended up leaving the not the Black Panther Party, but the Muslim Party, and actually was at a meeting with Dr. And I don't play that clip before I get out of it. He actually agreed with a lot of things Martin was saying. But see, people like to flip the narrative. They didn't like to do this revisionist history where they try to make it seem like Dr. King forgot what he stood up on. That's why I'm playing this clip back. I played enough of Malcolm because I know I'm against usually what most he said, but I agree with most of it. But now I'll play Martin. Now y'all listen to Martin, what Martin had to say, and then you'll see where I stand. But here we go. Right. Oh yeah, guys, make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe to my page. It's JB space 9 Deuce. That's capital J, capital B, space, meaning space bar, 9, then capital DUECE. All right, here we go.
They're devoid of racism. Do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority. I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality, and they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow.
I hate to keep intervening, but that goes back to, see, I was trying to find the middle ground between our arguments, and I'm glad Martin said that because it disproves what Malcolm said. Even Martin says exactly what Malcolm said about these white liberals. You've got to be all in and not at all. What did Jesus say? He said, "He who is not with me is against me, and he who would not with me scattereth." Once again, I respect what Jesus said. He said, "He who is not with me is against me, and he who is not gathered with me scattereth." Meaning that it's very simple. I know people get confused with Bible terms, but let me just break it down because it goes to what Martin and Malcolm both said. You cannot say you're trying to make change and then at the same time talking on both sides of your mouth, saying you want change, but until we get to this line right here that affects all white people. No, see, if you stood on what was right, even if it affected your greater interest, you say, no, my interest was in the interest of helping black folk. You will say, even if that goes against me and the rest of white people, because I believed of this going against white people before, why not now? But thank you. I'm glad Martin said that, but go ahead. Let's.
How? Not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact the Negroes are black?
That's a part of it, and that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing.
Yes, I agree with that. And I got what Martin said to, and see, that's what I love about Martin and Malcolm. They knew how to respond. Us as black men, if we're watching, any black men watch this, we gotta learn exactly from Martin and Malcolm how to answer these type of questions. I believe it exactly what he said. You gotta be honest. You gotta basically, in so many words, because I know how to comprehend what people are saying and sum it up in a few words. But I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate Martin saying that. Here we go.
And you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here and changed, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Hold on, guys. I'm trying to get my uncle on now. See, y'all think I'm BSing, but I have uncles that lived through the civil rights movement, and I want them to actually come on so they can speak. Let me talk to my uncle. You guys hold on just a minute. Please listen to Martin, because all this is important, guys. All this is important. So please do this. I was like in school. I'm gonna take a test on this. I'm gonna test y'all on this. But I'm gonna test y'all through the accounts of the people that was there, like my uncle and my grandfather, my father. I mean, excuse me. Shout out to my grandfather Robert Brown, who died. I would love if he was alive to see we do the show. I know he'd be proud. Shout out to Robert Brown, my grandfather. But anyway, but I want y'all to hear them speak. Here we go.
Grading.
Apart from wanting to live better, which all of us want to do, to raise one's children in a better way, to be better, does the Negro in America know what he wants to be?
I'm convinced that almost every Negro in this country, other than those who have been so scarred by the system that they've become pathological in the process, and we all have to battle with pathology. Nobody really knows what it means to be a Negro unless one can really experience it. And I know we all have to battle with this constant drain of a feeling of nobodiness. But in spite of this, I think the vast majority of Negroes in this country know that they want to be people, they want to be men, they want equality, period. It just boils down to that. And we haven't been able to be people. We haven't been men because of all of the conditions that we've lived with and the syndrome of deprivation surrounding conditions, whether it's in housing, in the economic area, or in schools, or in the vicious credit practices that we face in the ghetto, and all of the problems of closed doors and constant defeats. But in spite of all this, I think we all know basically that we want to be men. We want to be persons judged not on the basis of the color of our skin, but on the basis of the content of our character.
But you know that many young Negroes don't want anything that smacks of the American white middle class. But do they want something that smacks of whatever is the black middle class, or do they just
Hold on, guys. Right now, y'all gonna experience Black history. I'm gonna try to get my uncle to come on the show, and he lived through this Black history. So I want you to hear him, a living black man that lived through this. So hold on just a second, guys.
They just not want bourgeois values.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry for that the small delay. I was actually talking to my uncle. Shout out to Uncle Robert. I know you probably won't see the show, but I got much love for you. I don't talk to my family in Mississippi often, but I do love you guys. If you guys are seeing this, no, I do love you guys. I'm actually going to bring this show to a close, but I would like to and like I said, shout out to my Uncle Robert. He's going to come on 7:30. So for all the people my age who want to hear somebody that lived through civil rights, I would love for you guys to tune in at 7:30 Tuesday. 7:30 Tuesday, I'll be doing a part 2 to this. But I will end with this. So yeah, so please join me 7:30 Tuesday. But I would like to say this though, and I'll play even the rest of this Martin clip then instead of now. But I would like to say this. When it comes to Dr. King and Malcolm X, I take more of Dr. King's side on this because Dr. King was actually a lot more effective or effectual is the word to what got us to where we are today. In that, yes, we experience racism today. I've experienced racism today. So I'm not talking holier than thou, but I would like people to understand that where we are now is because of people like my uncle who fought. He fought in Vietnam. And you know how I feel about Vietnam guys, how they sent black men over there in disproportionate terms. And I was just talking to him on the line. That's why I've been away from you guys. Don't think I forgot about y'all. I didn't forget about y'all, but this is very important to me. So I would do all my research, and he's one living evidence of what I'm talking about the injustices we faced and how good it is today. And according to my uncle, he says segregation was probably better for black. So I would love to hear his opinion on this because I kind of fundamentally disagree. But that's what this whole conversation is about on this. See, this show is about having black men speak about how we feel. Love you, black women, but this is black men's perspective. And I would love to hear you as black women speak as well. But I'd like to end it with this. You know, like I said, shout out to my Uncle Robert. But I believe this. When it comes to Malcolm and Martin, I believe that Martin gets a big misunderstanding of what he stood for because people like to say that he started altering what he believed. And though he altered it, he did not forfeit. Altering and forfeit are two different words and they are not synonymous, meaning that altered, meaning that I adjusted my original intent. Forfeit means I gave up on my actual intent or what I had intended to do. So I'd like to say this to Martin. People like to say that Martin didn't get us anywhere, but I like to put it like this, guys. Martin had a deeper plan that he was doing that most people missed. And the plan he planned on doing was this. Notice he wanted nonviolence, right? But that was effectual because Malcolm think that violence was the way to get it. But here's the issue with Martin's way. See, Malcolm was trying to fight how us as black people fight amongst each other. We're like pit bulls. We raw, gnaw, and gall and fight till we bleed and die together. But Malcolm was more like, let's do it nonviolent. And here's the benefit in nonviolence was this. Let's just say you do it. Let me give you an example of why Martin was actually more effective. Because in nonviolence, remember, just because you did something nonviolent didn't mean what you did was ineffectual. Martin had said, okay, let me give you an example. If you do a sit-in, right? One thing I learned about white people, because I used to work at The Hat, which is a restaurant that's been around since 1956, which means they were around during the time of Jim Crow and all that, though they're not like that now. But what I'm saying is it's still, it has some racist things here and there, but very small, right? But my point being is with white people, they love their restaurants. Whether it's Starbucks or whatever, they usually take their family there on a consistent basis. I've seen families come in, white people, consistently because they love that restaurant. So let's take it back to 1960. When black people chained themselves to chairs, what happens is when those white people came to those restaurants, they seen, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of Negroes here. I don't want to eat here today. But what did that really do to white business? That cost them money. And like what I told black people, you don't fight white people like how we fight each other. We fight each other like pit bulls. We gnaw, growl, and we'll bite each other to death. But when it comes to white people, how you affect them is you attack their economics. Remember, Dr. King was a doctor, which means he went to what? College. A college that, remember, us as black people had to what? Fight for to be in. So that's another reason why I respect him, because he got a degree while fighting. So my point being, even before the fight, which means that it was even harder before his fight than what it is today, and even during the time he was trying to get these things passed. So my point is, Dr. King figured the psychology, because he was a psych major. The psychology is white people love their restaurants. Them seeing a group of black people up emphasizing the right to First Amendment to be wherever they want to be made them do what? question whether I want to be here. And if they question whether they want to be at a restaurant or not, it cost that white man money. So white people were more offended that Dr. King hurt their economics more than us punching them in the face. And to white people who are not black people, that's how they market things, how they see things through money. So Martin, costed white people money. And so that was way more effective than punching them in the face. So my point is Martin's nonviolent philosophy. Here's the thing I learned from this show that I used to watch. The villain of the show said to the hero, one of the heroes, he said, don't you understand that? He said this. He said, don't you understand hitting, striking, or being violent to somebody isn't the way to hurt a person? He said, for a man's spirit can be broken in much simpler ways. And what was the simpler way for white people? Was attacking their economics. I didn't have to scar, spit, or hang them for them to feel the same amount of attack that it would have took for us punching them in the face. So Martin's way was better because white people said, oh, I would eat at my favorite restaurant. In layman's terms, I would eat at my favorite restaurant, but look at all these Negroes here. It turned my stomach. And because of that kind of hatred, your foolish hatred made you ignore your hunger cravings to want to eat at your favorite place. So what does that mean? That means that Dr. King said, us just holding hands singing Kumbaya and we shall overcome and God is good, made those white people say, I don't even feel like eating here. But what did that do to the white manager of the establishment? It made him to lose money. And white people, if you want to attack them and make them want to kill you, is by attacking their money. And what did they end up doing to Martin? They ended up killing him. What did black people do to Malcolm? Because he started changing his ways. Y'all say Martin changed his. No, Malcolm changed his. So Martin's way was better because he said, let's attack these white people economically. After all, isn't that the argument of us as Generation X, millennials and millennials? Us as Generation X, millennials and millennials believe that economics is the way to fight against white people. Well, Dr. King did it in his day. See, we need to get past this. I want to punch somebody in the face because they said something I didn't like. How about we say, let's punch them in the face by taking away their economics? Because white people will murder you over economics. Dr. King is one of them. But when it comes to black people, look who murdered Malcolm. Black people. But that's another discussion. I know it's probably going to ruffle some feathers, going to shake the hornet's nest, and it's going to make some people mad. But that's what I did because I learned one thing from Jesus is when you speak truth, you will be faced with opposition. So I'm here to take on the opposition because what I know I stand on is right. But you guys, I'm got to get going. I have to be at work in a little while. It's 2:45. Okay, guys, I got to go. I love you guys. It wasn't a lot of people show up, but this just shows us as black people. Y'all show up here when I'm talking about the women and men and all that, but we just show up about what's going to advance us as a people. I said that we may get mad about what I say about women and what I say about men, but let's come together on a consensus about what's going to better us as black people. Again, this is JB9 Deuce, guys. I love you guys so much. God bless you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. In God's name, Yahweh. In Jesus Christ's name, Jesus. And in the Holy Spirit. Y'all have a good day. Be blessed. This is JB9 Deuce representing JB Speak Easy, the black platform where black men speak freely. I'm your host, JB9 Deuce. Uncle Robert, I'm expecting to see you. Love you so much, brother. And Beverly and all your and everybody in your family who's by my family as well. Y'all be blessed. Love y'all. God bless. Take care. And I love you guys all. In God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Take care.